My name is Hazel Fair. My mother wanted me called Rhoda. When Father went to register my birth, on the way there he decided that no way did he want a daughter called Rhoda Bicycle. So he never thought of what he wanted to call me, but when they asked what was my name, the only thing that went into his head was the place Hazelmere, Hampshire, which is a place he liked. So he said Hazelmere, and they wrote it down as Hazelvere. So I've got all posh. I was born the 16th of December 1919. I must have wanted to be there for Christmas. I used to play when I was small at Fort Cumberland. In those days, I don't know whether it still is, but in those days it was a neglected fort. On the seashore were old boats, and I believe that up there during the war, I'm not accurate on this, but I believe that's where they stored some of the boats that made up the, what do they call it, like a jetty to go ashore in France. But I used to watch the soldiers swimming in the sea at one time, and we could see that there was something there which vanished on D-Day, I think it was called. In those days, girls without husbands were called old spinsters and looked down on. I mean, you weren't thought much of, I don't think, in the long years after that. But I think she thought it was probably the better of two choice, so she chose to marry my father. And I can't remember them. They were never loving, as one would think of it. I know he gave her a peck on the cheek every time he went out and came, you know, but I thought that was what all fathers and mothers did. There was one time, I do remember this very vividly, one of the kiddies at school brought in a bird. A cat had got at it, and she brought it in. Her mother said, Miss Farrell will make it better. But I do remember very much, eventually, of course, no matter what we did, I read everything I could, and gave it all sorts of bird seed. I was awash for bird seed by the time that bird died, because I suppose I didn't know how to look after it properly, and it had been injured by the cat, but that died eventually. So I was left with a load of bird seed, which I scattered all over the place to the wild birds. Another thing, Mother wouldn't have a cat. But I don't know which one, but one brother must have brought a cat home, because I do know there was a cat about. I do remember Mrs. Lerwell, her name was, her dog had puppies, and it was a pom, and she gave me one of these poms, and I called it Brownie for obvious reasons, and we were due to go away on this touring holiday. And my mother sent my father off with it to the vet to have it put down, because it used to be sick in the car. Well, it was only a baby puppy, and the holiday, I suppose, came up before it had been long enough times in the car not to be sick. But she sent my father off to have it put down, and it escaped from him and ran back to me. And she took Brownie out of my arms, shoved it back on my father, and sent him off to have it put down. And that is a bit I never forgot, and I never forgave her. My mother didn't want me, as she let me know right through my life. So I wasn't unhappy. I was never without anything. I was never denied anything. I was fed, but life was dull. But I didn't realise it then. I thought everybody lived that way, just doing what they were told. I wasn't allowed to go out with any other children except the twins. But then I think later on, oh yes, what was her name now? There was one girl I did know, lived across the road, I think, and she used to go to dancing classes and was trying to teach me to tap dance. So I knew about tap dancing till my mother realised that we were out on the pavement doing that, and that was stopped immediately. I was in. I didn't know it, of course, when I was young, but when I was born, I was, according to, well, I was supposed to die but didn't, and I've always said that was me being awkward. But I didn't die, and I can think now, thinking back, why I wasn't allowed to go to birthday parties and things, or go out much, and only went out with my parents and didn't go out to play or anything. I wasn't allowed to go out and play. I think I probably, because I wasn't very strong. I am, sometimes I'm well, sometimes I'm not, but at this particular time I'd been ill in this chair, not that anybody knew because nobody comes, for 3 days. So of course if I'm not well, I don't get anything to eat or drink because there's nobody to get it for me. But I rang up a surgery and the receptionist said, oh, wait a minute, and left me, and I came back to the phone and she said to me, and I remember this, we can't, but we're too busy to deal with you, ring 999. So I rang 999 and they said you should ring the surgery. So I said I just have, and they told me to ring 999 and put the phone down, you see. Well, she must have thought about that, whoever was answering, because the next thing is there was a ambulance with, or I don't know whether there was an ambulance, but there was paramedics wanting to come in. The first time I went, was carted off to the hospital. They wire me up when they get me in there. But the first time, the first doctor said to me, when did you have your last baby? So I said, well, as I've never had one, and he looked a bit straight, he'd got somebody else's papers, not mine. Then the next doctor who came, was a little while afterwards, he said, how long did it take to get over your operation? I said, what operation? I haven't had it yet. What is it for? That was not right. And another time I was taken there, I was carted round in a chair, actually, to 5 wards. And it was only when I overheard 2 medical people talking, they said, we can't find her papers. So I piped up, being me, I piped up. I said, it might be an idea if you spelt my name correctly and got the right name first. The bottom garage was where Father kept his sports car, and the top garage was a big one, and he kept the family saloon there. I think it was a Wolsey at one time anyway. And we used to come in and out. I say we because I had a brother. I had 3 brothers, but I don't remember much about them because they're all much older than me, and one of them was married. I have been told that the 2 eldest are dead, and I don't know about the other one. I never see them. When Father died, he died up at the playing field. He used to go up to watch the lads, as he called them, play football and look after their money or watches or things, anything like that. And he died there, and I had to go up to the sick bay. They called me from school. I was teaching by then. They called me from school. The policeman came and took me up to the sick bay, and I had to identify Father. But after Father died, my brothers, one of them never seemed to be in the picture at all. My other brothers stepped smartly backwards and said they weren't having Mother, no way. My eldest brother said he couldn't have her, his wife had asthma. What that had to do with it, I haven't a clue, but it apparently was. and the other one said he didn't like her anyway, so he wasn't going to have her. So I was the only one who didn't have the guts to say neither did I, but I had to look after her. And she lived a hell of a lot of years after that, but nevertheless, at the end my brother pushed her into the hospital and she died there. My brothers were away. They both went, they were put it, I presume, whether they wanted to or not, I don't know, but they were put into music. The eldest one, I don't know what he did eventually, except he met a girl in a place called Basingstoke, which is in Hampshire, and he married her eventually, and that was it. He went off and had his own life. The last I heard, he was still alive, but whether he is now or not, I haven't the faintest idea. What he'd done in the meantime, I haven't a clue. I forget when Father died, but they never spoke to me after that. Beyond about, I suppose, perhaps 2 words. I was just left to get on with it. My eldest brother came back on the scene, and he used to come whilst I was at school. He'd come and see my mother. I know he'd been because things used to vanish from the house. And I never said anything because I never saw him anyway. But I knew he'd been because things went from cupboards. But if he wanted them, I suppose he could have them. Done with it. But in the end, nobody ever asked me what I thought about anything. And I found out, came home one day and she was being carted off to the hospital. So she was put in, not that she was ill, it was just that her mind wasn't there. And she used to put a kettle on, for instance, on the gas stove. And I used to buy a saucepan about every other day because she'd put a saucepan on, saying she hadn't had anything to eat. I'd only given her a lunch, perhaps just 5 minutes before, but finally at the end, she's like I am, even worse I suppose than I am now. She would forget things, and no, I knew nothing about whatever they call it now. What is it? I heard it once. Alzheimer's. Nobody knew things about Alzheimer's. All I know that my mother had been a so-and-so all her life, and it was just an extension of her being a so-and-so. She'd mislay her purse or her handbag or things like that, and she'd tell the lady next door, who was a chiropodist, she'd tell her I'd stolen her bag. I'm not going balmy, but I do find that my mind doesn't retain things, and I don't remember dates and things like that very often. I did look it up the other day, I forget why, but I came to Gloucester in 1989, so or at least I came here in 1989, and I thought that was a mistake. Mind, I still do, but by then I'd lost my money and I couldn't afford to move anyway. Couldn't have paid the remover. Here in Stonehouse, when I had my car, I spent very little time in Stonehouse because there was no reason to spend it. People didn't talk to you. People along the road don't say good day. I don't know their names, most of them. 90% of them don't even say good morning if you pass them by. And there was nothing much here. It wasn't actually Fair Shares that provided more social life for me than that was when it first started. I joined Fair Shares. I was persuaded to come to Gloucestershire by a fellow Irish setter owner. She said, if we go to shows, by that time I was showing my setter, my 2 setters to be exact. If we go to shows together, you can leave your papillon in my kennels. She more or less helped me to find a place and found a bungalow, and she beat the owner down into the price. I'm no good at that. And I moved down there. Well, I used to drive from there to St Breville's and give her a hand each day, and then we started to go to the shows together, or apart, because she didn't come to the pap shows. And I found that each time I went, she charged me for looking after my dogs in her kennels. And I thought, blow that for a box of soldiers. Working on the system that I don't waste anything, I now use these as table mats. 84, let's see, that was 1984, so it's 94. You can work out how many years that makes yourself. So that was the Isle of Wight. I used to go across on the ferry to the Isle of Wight with my Irish setters and papillons and show each time. That one, in fact, was won by Czar at 18 months, who was best of breed. I went to the Philippines and I got myself a job. I was teaching, or at least supposed to be teaching. I tried to, but the parents barred. They had three children, a boy, a girl, and it was a baby in a pushchair. No, in a high chair. That had its own nanny. And I'm blowed if I could teach those kids, because the mother kept getting in the way. Every time I tried to teach them, she sent the boy off to be taught by the Jesuits, because they were Catholic, and the girl, she made her an namby-pamby. I thought I might teach them to ride, but no, couldn't do that. Those shoes, just after the war, there were moves afoot to do all sorts of things to give the Filipinos work again, because they'd been, of course the Germans took over, the Japanese rather, not Germans. The Japanese walked in, as we walked out the other side. They walked in and they took over. So after the war, there were the ideas of giving them something to do and all sorts of jobs. And they were very clever with their hands, the Filipinos. During the war, I did have boyfriends. The first one was a Fleet Air Arm, and when you go off a flight deck, you're supposed to go up. He went off the flight deck and went down. The first time he did that, he and the plane were rescued, but the second time he did it, he wasn't. So that was that one. And the other one was Navy. As you can see, I did sailing. The other one was Navy, and he went one day out and just didn't come back. So I was upset, extremely so, I must admit, but very upset. And then later on, I wouldn't risk it anymore. I thought, you know, when the next bloke was very keen on me, I said no, and I wouldn't get extra friendly, because I thought the next thing is you'll die and it'll be my fault. After the war, he was a manager. He wasn't a manager, but Mewks's brewery he worked for, and Mewks, when they knew we were together, I had to be interviewed by Mewks brewery to see if I was good enough to be the wife of one of their managers, believe it or not. But his sister told me he was having an affair with a person who lived up the road, and that was the end for me. I wasn't going to be involved any further, so I broke that one off. And after that I thought, I'm not trusting anymore, so I didn't.